All right, I got the Mooch with me from Mondays with Mooch on YouTube. Mooch is a former 1% biker, an MMA fighter, and a social worker. What's happening, Mooch?
Not much, man. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. You kidding? Thanks for coming on. And now you're a YouTuber.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Brand new to it.
So how's that going? Because it's the title is Mondays with Mooch. How's that going?
It's been pretty good. I haven't been super consistent with it because I'm still trying to figure out how YouTube works and editing and everything else. I had some initial ideas, and then I figured out just sitting here talking to the screen by myself wasn't very entertaining. Mm-hmm. So I've been trying to get different guests on and people from my past to kind of tell stories with them. So It's been a little bit better, but then, coordinating schedules and everything else. So I want to get a little more consistent, but so far it's been going really well. I've had really good feedback.
All right, cool. I got, at the end of this, I got some contacts I can give you. And some of the people I've had on my show will probably be more than willing to come on yours.
Awesome.
Yeah. And what's funny is I went through the same thing. And for about, I'd say 3 or 4 months, I was just talking into the laptop and I was like, I thought it was interesting, but apparently nobody else fucking did. So I turned it into somewhat of a interview channel, cool. So I do a lot of interviews. But all right, so we're going to talk about you. So you are a former outlaw 1% biker.
Correct.
And you were in the club for 14 years.
Yeah. And before that, I was in another major club for 2 years. So I've got about 16 years of experience.
Oh, wow. Okay. Are we allowed to name the clubs or no?
Yeah, that's fine. I was in the Vagos for 2 years, and then I patched over to the Mongols, and I was joined in 2007 of November. So I'm coming up on 15.
Wow. So this is like, you were no joke. You went straight to the top.
Yeah. Sure.
All right. Okay. So this is your first time here. So let's just start from the beginning. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Where are you from?
I'm from Salem and Portland, Oregon. So I grew up in Salem, and then after high school, I moved to Portland. I spent most of my time there, but then I moved to San Diego for a while when I was actually on the run from the law, and then turned myself in, went back to jail in Oregon, got out, went to school, and then I did my undergrad in Los Angeles at Whittier College, and then went back to Oregon, and now I'm out here in Southern Illinois. So I moved around a little bit.
Yeah, you're all over the map. But let's back up a little. You were born in Salem?
Yep.
That's Salem, Massachusetts. Is that right?
Saleem, Oregon.
Salem, Oregon. Wrong Salem. Okay.
Yeah.
Salem. Yeah, Salem, Oregon. And then, if you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you were on the run?
That time, let's see, it was 2008. So I don't know, 27.
Oh, so okay. So before that, what was your childhood like? Your teenage years and so on and so forth.
It was pretty good, man. I'm an identical twin. So I grew up with an identical twin brother.
That's cool.
Yeah, he was actually supposed to do the podcast with me. And so that was our initial goal. And then when he said he wasn't going to, that's when I was like, whatever, I'll do it myself. And then, like I said, I sat in here and tried to talk in front of the computer by myself, and it didn't go real well.
Right.
But man, my whole family is teachers and sports coaches. So we were really involved in sports. So we grew up wrestling, did a little bit of boxing. Because we were close to the same size, my mom put us at different high schools for wrestling. She didn't want us to be on the same team. Mm-hmm. So we went to different high schools. I think the goal is that we'd have like our own peer groups, but because we're twins, she wanted us to have our own identities, but it didn't really work out. We still ended up hanging out with the same people. And then I moved to Oregon or to Portland after that. So after high school.
Okay. Now, did you have both mom and dad with you when you grew up, or just mom?
Dad went to prison when I was 8, and he did about 10 years. Okay. But mom and dad weren't together when they kind of like co-parented, like dad was on the weekends, but they were never really married or together. Okay. But I've had the same stepdad since I was about 5. So he's been pretty much my father, and my dad's kind of more of like a friend,
Yeah. Sometimes it happens that way, man. You can't pick your family. It is what it is. So when did you start getting in trouble with the law?
Man, I don't know if it was because I had a twin or what, but we fought a lot. And so I was fighting in school quite a bit. And I got my first felony at 16 was for fighting. It was after school, but it was with someone from school. It's like right outside of school, like at the bus stop. Yeah. So I got a felony for that, and I was on probation. And then when I turned 18, I got in another fight with people from school, but at a park later, and caught my first adult felony there. So pretty early on, man. Pretty much in my teens, I really started picking up charges for different assaults. I think I ended up about 12 misdemeanor assaults and then a felony assault.
So you got a felony for fist fighting?
Yeah, well, I hit a guy with a bottle. So Oregon has Oregon it was right around that time. Oregon came out with a mandatory minimum sentencing called Measure 11. So it didn't matter if you had priors. There was like if you met the threshold, it was like 5 years, 10 months if you had a weapon. I was guilty of it, first of all. And then second of all, I didn't want to risk. I thought it was mutual combat. I felt it was mutual combat. It was me and my brother against 5 other people. But because I had a weapon, I didn't want to take it to court. So I ended up plea bargain to assault in the 3rd degree and ended up getting that felony charge.
And how old were you at this point?
I like a month into 18.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you actually do any time?
So we did a couple of weeks when it first happened. And then because we were in school, the judge was pretty cool and let us do like Christmas break. I had to do spring break. And then I had to do a full month right after I graduated. So, it was only a couple of months. So it was just county jail time.
Okay. For some reason, it seems like guys who have twin brothers, it's almost like they are inseparable, like identical twins. I have a friend at work who was an identical twin. He's always with his brother. If you ever watched the channel, oh God, what's it called? The Hodge twins. They're identical and they're always together. They work together, in the service together. They always work together. What is it about being a twin that makes you so together? But also, it's more like it's not like a regular brother, blood brother. It is just you're almost attached by the hip.
Right. Yeah, I think we just shared everything, pretty much every experience together growing up. It's like, from the second we were born, I was always somebody there with me. So, any family trips, anything we did, there was always someone there with us. And whether it was, shared traumas or good times, there was always someone there going through it with me. So I think you just develop a special bond when you always have someone there by your side through thick and thin.
Okay. So now you are 18 and you continue to get in trouble with the law?
Yeah.
And it's for mostly fist fighting, assault. You could break it down.
Yeah, most of it's for fighting. So Jeremy and I became involved in the anti-racist skinhead scene probably when we were about 17 and ended up joining a pretty big gang called the Rose City Bobber Boys. And we fought really heavy with like Volks Front, Eastside White Pride, a lot of the white power gangs. So we were fighting a lot. And due to that, we were also getting arrested a lot.
Now, that's funny you should, because this is the second time in my life that I even knew that there was an anti-racist gang culture. Because a friend of mine at work said the same thing, but to be honest with you, I didn't believe him.
Yeah, no, a lot of people don't know about it.
I did not believe it. He goes, yeah, I was fighting skin. I thought he was full of shit. I'm like, yeah, okay,
yeah. He's probably telling you the truth.
Yeah. So how did that work? I never even heard of that. You could explain that.
Yeah, for sure. So the skinhead culture kind of came, a lot of it, I guess a good way to explain it is like, say, the punk rock scene or emo or anything else, right? It was a culture based off of music. So it was a style of fashion mainly based off East Indian music and reggae music. And so, it was primarily reggae music, but a lot of the East Indians in England and Europe were kind of getting into this fashion and the white working class. So initially it wasn't related to politics whatsoever. It was just a fashion statement of people that like certain types of music, which was mainly like reggae, rocksteady, that type of early stuff. And then it got really heavy into like Northern soul music. And then eventually progressed into like harder stuff, punk rock, and, probably a lot of the stuff that people hear out here. And then in the 80s, it got overtaken by politics. So, it was like one of those things where they were in the media a lot. And so, both sides try to use it to their advantage. And, at the time, there was a lot of right-wing stuff going on in Europe and pretty much everywhere. And so, they started recruiting skinheads into their racist movement. And because of the way they looked, they've all been labeled as racist. But traditional skinheads are not racist.
I see what you're saying. Now, what years were this about?
I graduated high school in 2000. We joined that gang in 2002, but we kind of have our own like little sub crew because we were like kids trying to be like the cool older guys.
Okay.
Probably since 96.
Okay. All right. And how long were you running with this crew?
We left in 2005 when we started riding motorcycles.
Okay. So you're getting arrested, you get in trouble, you're fist fighting, you're gang fighting. Do you go past assault?
No. The only felony I have is for that assault charge.
Okay. So there's, is there drugs, alcohol, anything?
Man, what's funny is I was sober the whole time. I drank a little
bit. Really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
I probably drank a little bit, like late teens, early 20s. But man, I always wanted, like, because we got in fights at bars or in concerts or in public, I always wanted to kind of have my wits about me, so to speak. So I never liked to be under the influence. I like to be in control. There'd be times at house parties or stuff. Maybe I'd get a little lit and drink, but I was pretty anti-drug most of my life, and I rarely drank back then.
Okay. So in 2005, you joined your first motorcycle club.
Yeah.
What made the change from going from the crew that you were with to the motorcycle club in 2005?
Yeah, so in the skinhead scene, it's popular to ride scooters, right? Like the old Vespas, like the 2-stroke.
Really? I didn't know any of it.
Yeah,
It's all new to me. Okay.
so a lot of us were riding scooters, and then the kind of the older guys in the crew, as they got older, they were progressing from scooters to motorcycles. So Jeremy and I started riding motorcycles. That's my brother, Jeremy. So we started riding motorcycles, and I think it's just one of those things that when I do something, I want to do it 110%. So when I got into punk rock and skinhead, I wanted to be in the best gang there was on the West Coast. And then when I started riding motorcycles, I wanted to be in a motorcycle club. So we found out there was actually a local club in Portland called the Outsiders. They'd been there since the 60s, super old school. And that's who we hung around with first. And they really taught us like what the culture was about. What just motorcycle clubs in general are about, a lot of protocols and stuff like that. So we kind of got our toes wet there with the Outsiders.
And how old were you at that point?
24.
Okay. 24. So you and your brother had a wild streak in you.
Yeah, for sure.
But what's funny is this is the first time I'm hearing that guys had wild streaks in them and were rough dudes and did not drink and do drugs. This is you're the first guy I've ever heard. I mean,
yeah, I have to blame my poor decisions just on me, I guess.
Yeah, you can't say I was under the influence.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and how long were you with the Outsiders?
We hung around them for a few months, and that's around that time I'd ended up moving to Nevada for work, just to kind of try something new. And that's when I ended up meeting the Vagos when I was down there in Nevada. Jeremy stayed in Oregon actually initially, and he was still hanging around the Outsiders until I joined the Vagos, and I talked him into coming down and joining with me. What
were you doing? What were both of you doing for a living at this point?
Well, so when I was in that skinhead gang stuff, I was actually in a band, and I was traveling the country for like 5 years. So I'd be like on the road for 2 months, home for a month, on the road, home. So we were traveling a lot. So in between touring, I was either pumping gas or I ended up getting a job at a porn store. And I started as a night security shift, and I ended up working my way up to manager. So I managed a porn store for several years. And then when I moved to Nevada, I was actually trying out to be an electrician apprentice. I figured, you know what, I need to get my stuff together, learn a career. So I started out with that. It didn't last for very long just because I wasn't showing up to work because I was doing biker stuff and I was gone a lot. So then I fell back into selling motorcycles. So when I was down there, I was selling motorcycles for Harley.
Oh, wow. Okay. So when you were down in Nevada, you were working specifically for Harley Davidson?
Yep. Yeah. For the Carson City Harley Davidson.
So if you don't mind me asking, how long did it take to prospect for the Vagos?
The Vagos actually handed me a patch. So they were starting.
Really?
So they were starting a new chapter. They were pretty small in the area I was in. And, I tried pretty hard to prove myself. And, you know how it is when you're young, right? I wanted to be known as that tough guy, and I was doing dumb things. And so I was actually offered to join without prospecting.
Wow. That's impressive. Did they know your reputation? Did they like check with the Outsiders or anything like that?
They did check. Yeah, for sure. There was definitely a background check, and they did check with the Outsiders. I wouldn't know if so much they had understood the reputation, because these guys at the time, some of them were older, and I don't know if they understood kind of that world I came from. Mm-hmm. But there was, one of the things that really drew me to the Vagos at the time is back home in Oregon, all these clubs were like older guys. And I remember, no disrespect to any of them, but I remember at one point sitting around the clubhouse and looking around, and it was like, man, if it wasn't for this club, I don't really have anything in common with any of these dudes. Like, these aren't guys that invite to a movie or barbecue, and we listen to different music, everything. Our whole culture was different. And when I met the Vagos, there was a lot of younger dudes that were like into skateboarding and punk rock and, cool stuff. And so I was like, wow, that blew my mind. I was like, I didn't know I can be a biker and still be into punk rock and all this stuff. So, I jumped in pretty quick. I didn't do a lot of research and check around. I was just like, whoa, cool, younger guys riding bikes. And we jumped right in.
Okay. Very cool, man. So, and how long were you with that club for?
2 years, just shy of 2 years.
Okay. And then how did you go from them to the Mongols, or was there somewhere in between?
No, there was no in between. I moved back to Oregon after I was probably in Carson City for about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And I moved back and my brother moved back, and we transferred to a Vagos chapter in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And it just ended up not being the right club for me. Like I said, I jumped in pretty quick. I didn't do a lot of research. I had some really good times and I met some really good people, but a lot of it didn't align with my lifestyle. I've never been. I'm trying to figure out how to word this, but my thing. So when I grew up in that gang life, if you got in trouble or disciplined, it was always dealt with by assault. So it was always like your own friends were beating you up or jumping you. And it really undermined the fabric of brotherhood in my mind. Like I didn't, I know it's a whole, hey, let's fight and then have a beer, but there was always lingering issues. Right. And I didn't want to be involved in something like that. And so we were in some incidents where some members were fighting other members, and it just kind of was the downfall for me, where I was like, man, I joined this to ride motorcycles and have a brotherhood. And there was so much internal drama that it just really wasn't for me.
Okay. And when you moved back to Oregon, what were you doing for a living? I'm assuming you stopped managing the porn store.
Yeah. No, I was actually an apprentice for a guy that was laying tile. So I was doing grout work and cleaning tile and laying tile. And we actually built a hospital up there, Sacred Heart Hospital in Eugene. And there was a Vago that owned the company. So there was like 4 of us on the crew.
Oh, very cool, man. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Now, did you continue with being a mason, tile work, or anything like that?
Now, when I left the Vagos, he ended up staying. And so that made things a little sketchy. So
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So no, then I was just doing kind of random things for a little while.
Okay. So how did you go from the Vagos to the Mongols?
So I had known, when I lived in Carson City, I'd actually known a few Mongols, and they had a pretty big, serious reputation. And again, like I said, I'm one of those guys that, yeah. But that was my thing too. Like if I was going to be in club, I want to be in club that everybody knew. And, from what I'd seen, I don't know, I felt like it kind of aligned with more of who I was as a person. There's a lot of dudes that came from gang life that were in it. Everyone was really clean cut and pressed jeans. And like, it wasn't like the dirty biker image. And it just kind of spoke to me, and they were really well known for how tight their brotherhood was. So I had known a Mongol in Nevada. And actually, the Mongols had posted on their website back when clubs had websites, and they said they wanted to welcome their Oregon chapter, which apparently, looking back now, there was like one guy, but we didn't know this. So I had reached out to the Mongols and said, hey, man, I'm in the Vagos and I'm in the same area, and I'd love to get to know your guys. And so I kind of just opened a line of communication. And then I think, eventually they figured out what my intentions were, and they offered, they wanted to meet, but they wanted me to meet them in Florida. So I actually flew by myself to Bike Week in Daytona in 2007, Biketoberfest, to hang out with a bunch of Mongols I'd never met. That was a ballsy move that, looking back, I can't believe I did it, but man, I was pretty dedicated, and I want to show them I was ready for it.
I was going to say right off the bat, they just from that move, they're like, okay, this guy's serious. Just the fact that you flew down there.
Yeah. And nothing we can really get into, but, something had happened down there where they gave me the opportunity to leave, since they were like, hey, you're not involved in this. And I didn't. So I earned some respect there too. And some of those guys are still in the club, and we've had a great relationship since then because of that.
Oh, okay, good. And you stayed with the Mongols for 14 years, 15
14 years. Yeah. I retired about a month after my 14-year anniversary.
Okay. Very cool. So I got to ask you about, well, first, what is your background? Do you know your actual nationality background?
Yeah, we're pretty much all Italian, the whole fam.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, most of my family's from New Jersey, and then the handful of them moved from New Jersey to Oregon. So my grandparents are from Oregon, and my great grandparents are from Italy.
Wow. Okay, so we have a lot in common, you and me. We're both blue collar guys, and we're both Italian. So
yes, sir.
We're good. You have to tell me about the porn store. Did you see anything crazy in there or anything like that? Or was it just basically selling DVDs? Or did you ever catch anybody jacking off and you had to give them a beat and throw them out?
Man, it was a little of both. So one of the older guys that was in the skinhead gang with me, he actually owned it. Okay. And so we had a pretty good crew going, we'd hire friends and stuff like that. Thankfully there was 24/7 janitors, so we didn't have to do any of that type of stuff. But it's funny because everyone used to be like, oh man, I bet you meet so many chicks, but it's primarily gay people that go in there. Okay. If girls come in, it's usually for like a bachelor party or something, so they're all embarrassed. Yeah. But a lot of it was pretty run of the mill coming in. This was in a day and age where people were still buying VHS tapes. So people were coming in and renting DVDs and buying VHS. Thankfully, around the time I got out of it is when the economy started going downhill and they started getting robbed a lot. Thankfully, I'd never been robbed and had to deal with that. But did start happening a lot shortly after I left.
Yeah. When I was about 18, 19, there was this place on 3rd Avenue in Brooklyn. It was just called the Triple X Warehouse, man. And me and my friends used to go down there, and we used to just buy just random DVDs and whatnot, right? And I remember the first one that I bought. It was the first one I ever bought. Like, I had stuff from my brothers, or my father had stuff hidden in the house, or things like that. But the first one I bought, right? And it's so funny. The title, I'll never forget the title. It was called Tits, Tits, Tits.
Clever.
Right? And believe it, I never.
So what
changed.
was it about?
Yeah. Well, it was actually a sequel. You got to find it. You got to watch the first one. No, but it was just pretty funny. And as far, and it's another thing. Like my middle brother, I don't know if he's the toughest out of the three of us, or he's the stupidest, right? But I remember he used to work in Carvel, and when he was 17 years old, kid came in there and tried to rob the place, and he refused to give him anything. And then he goes, "Nah, you're not robbing it while I'm here."
Right.
And the kid got frustrated and left. And when he went home, my father flipped out. He goes, "What the fuck do you care? The kid could have killed you. It's not your money."
Right. Yeah, that was one of those things that would go through your head, like, what would I do if? But you know how that goes, right? Everyone says what they would do, and someone would normally, a lot of times you do something different. So that's pretty cool, because not a lot of people would do that.
No, not at all. I would have given him the money and been like, "Here you go."
Yeah, I mean, my conflict would have been, like I said, my friend owns the place, but thankfully it never happened, so I never had to find out what I would have done.
All right, good. So, I interviewed Anthony Ruggiano, and actually Anthony Ruggiano is going to be on Hollywood's YouTube channel.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. That YouTube channel is Insane. What is it? Insane Throttle.
Yeah, Insane Throttle Biker News.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. It really is. Him and who is the girl that he does it with? They have like a great rapport. I forgot the name of the girl that he does it with.
Oh, that China doll?
Oh, they have a great rapport. They're hilarious together, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen the episodes with her on them.
Oh, it's fucking great, because she's like, and he rips her apart, and she's just like, but anyway, so he's going to be on Anthony. So Anthony Ruggiano did 14 years in prison. His father was a captain in the Gambinos, and they're obviously from New York and Queens. And Anthony Ruggiano Jr. was his son, and he followed suit, same thing, blah, blah, blah. And one of the questions I asked him is, I said, everybody wants to talk about like the time you did in prison and the murders and, all the things you did, like on the street, like but I want to ask you about the benefits of being. I was like, what about the benefits? Like, did you have a lot of girls? Was there a lot of money? Did you have a lot? Were you able to do things that you weren't able to if you were just a regular Joe Schmo working a 9 to 5? And he went in depth about that. He was able to go see Frank Sinatra and sit front row, and that he had plenty of girls. And when he was 18, he was dating a bartender that was 25, because he was able to take it to the Copa. Because you're talking, this was like the 70s, right?
Right.
So when you're in one of the largest biker clubs in the world, basically, what are the benefits? Like, is it really like, hey, girls and money and able to do things you're not able to do if you're a 9 to 5 regular dude?
As far as the money goes, it costs money. You're traveling a lot. We're paying monthly dues. So that, it's definitely, you can't really make money doing it. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely a lot of fun. So, one big thing is I got to travel all over. So when I got higher up in the leadership, I was overseeing some of the chapters from out of state or out of country, and a lot of them couldn't get here. So if we had meetings or stuff, we'd go to Mexico. I got to go to Thailand. So that was super cool. And that's something probably wouldn't have done on my own. Right. A lot of the time I spent on the road on my motorcycle and big groups of guys, like, we'd ride in packs of 100, 150 guys, huge packs. So stuff like that was really, really cool. Man, it wasn't really like the TV show says with girls and stuff. I mean, at Oregon, we'd go to a lot of strip clubs and hang out at a lot of strip clubs. But you know what? A lot of it was because we never got messed with there. People don't seem to think or realize that when you go out with a big group of guys that stand out and you're wearing a patch, people want to mess with you a lot.
Really?
Yeah. There's always some drunk guy that wants to be a tough guy or start shit. And it was one of those things where it's like, we were tired of going to jail, and I was tired of seeing my guys get in trouble. So a strip club to us, especially, in Oregon, there's more strip clubs per capita than anywhere in the country. So it's not like these really fancy, you got to spend a bunch of money to get in. They're kind of like a regular bar with naked girls. But the atmosphere was always cool because people were in there either hustling or checking out chicks. No one was paying attention to us. So that, we did hang out at a lot of strip clubs and, meet a lot of girls. And so a lot of times when we'd have parties, we'd have a lot of private dancers and stuff like that. So
that's great.
There was some cool, like definitely incredible parties, and just the best time was just spending time with our friends, man, traveling the country with some of your best friends.
That's great. And what's funny is that, you're 100% right. Cause there's a spot by me. There was a spot before COVID actually, and it closed down, and I wish it didn't, because like the bouncer knew me, the bartender knew me, and I would just to blow up steam, I'd go there by myself. And there was a strip club, gentleman's club, whatever you want to call it. And I would just go in there and, have a couple of drinks, and the music was playing, the girls were dancing, and I knew all the girls were there to make money. So I would spend money, everybody got tipped. The bartender got tipped, I think I went for a lap dance once, but I was really there just to like, kind of just blow off some steam,
Right.
And I would do that a couple of times a month. And I would go by myself, and I would go before all the riffraff came in. So I would go before 11 p.m. So I'd go like after work, come at 6, 7.
Yeah, the mellow times.
Right. And it was actually relaxing. And that place closed, and there's another place that I go to from time to time now. But anyway.
Yeah, unless you've been there, I don't think you would get that. And I know everyone thinks, especially, the wives and everyone else, unless they've been there, that, oh, it's this crazy thing. And, I know some of those big name ones for sure, those aren't that pleasant because someone's always coming up and hustling and asking for a dance and asking for money. But the normal like neighborhood ones, you can pretty much go and be unbothered. So, it's a pretty good place to just be chill.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I went. And like, but you're right. I mean, there are basically, at the beginning when I first went to that place, they would constantly come up to me. And then after a while, they kind of knew. So one time this girl comes up next to me, and she says, can you buy me a drink? And I bought her a drink, and says, do you want to dance? I was like, no, listen. And I actually told her, I'll never forget. I said to her, look, I'm not going to get a dance. So you don't have to waste your time hanging out with me. I know you're here working, and I know you need to make money. So go do your thing, because I'm not going to get a dance. You know what she said? She must have, see, I'm thinking rationally like a dude, right?
Right.
I'm being straightforward with you. You're not going to make any money with me with the exception of the few dollars I'm going to give you. But otherwise, go make your money, right? And she felt like hurt. She felt rejected. And she goes, I don't come here to make money. I come here to have fun just like you. And I'm like, so you do this for free?
Right.
It was unbelievable. You got no scruples, do you? Holy shit. Anyway. Okay. So, when do you have this transformation? Like, when do you go from like, okay, I'm done running, and I kind of, because you became a social worker, and that means, to me, that tells me that you did this complete 180, and you're a different person now.
Yeah.
And you go, that stuff's behind me, and I want to help people now.
Yeah. So I was still in the club actually. And so at the time, I got arrested again in 2008. My parents live on like 150 acres, and there's 2 houses out there, and I was staying at one, and this all black SUV had been coming up my driveway, and I followed it, and I ended up following it for about 100 miles. And at one point I was in a car or in a truck. And at one point I had called ahead to some other guys in cars, and we kind of boxed them in and attempted to figure out who they were. Well, unbeknownst to me, it was ATF, federal agent. So I actually got arrested, and I was thinking, what could they possibly arrest me for? Following the car, right? Yeah. Well, I got charged with conspiracy to kidnap a federal officer, and I was held on a $15 million bail.
You were following me.
Yeah.
I just followed you back.
Yep. Yeah. So I've actually fought that. I took it all the way to a jury trial, and I won. But I spent about 2.5 months in jail fighting it. But I did get convicted of reckless driving, which was a misdemeanor. But they charged me because of who I was and the club I was in. I got one. They gave me a year in jail and then 5 years of felony gang probation, supervised probation. So I probably ended up doing that year off and on. But so I did like 2 more days after being sentenced, and then I got kicked out because I was in an overcrowded jail on a misdemeanor charge, right? Mm-hmm. So there wasn't much they could do. I had to do like 2 months of work crew, and then that was it for my jail time. However, one of the stipulations was I couldn't affiliate with the club, and including my twin brother. And I violated that numerous times, and I got caught a lot of times. And every time I got caught, I'd have to go back and do about a month or 2. So I probably ended up doing that full year on probation violations. And one of those last times, I remember, always go back. They take you back to the same jail, to the same area. And I was in a 23 and a half hour lockdown, and just boring, losing my mind. And one of those times, one of the guards had told me that they had a bet if I was going to be back or not. And they didn't think I would, because he's pretty much said, "Hey man, you're not like the other people in here." And that really hit me pretty hard, man. Cause I remember looking around thinking, okay, yeah, I'm not strung out. I don't do drugs. I'm not really a criminal. I mean, I'm been arrested for fighting, but I'm not out breaking the law. I really didn't belong here. And I was really tired of going in and out of jail. So I decided I was going to go back to school. And initially there was a guy in the Mongols, Richie Rich. He's a PhD in clinical psychology. He's got way more. Yeah. And he's got way more tattoos than me. Like the dude's a G. And I was thinking, well, man, if this guy can do it, maybe I should check that out. So I started out with drug and alcohol counseling. And that was only a 2-year program, but I fell in love with psychology. So then I got my bachelor's in psychology, and then I continued and I got my master's in social work.
See those 2 degrees up behind me?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of them's in psychology.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's super fascinating. Right. And the reason I chose, I'm a clinical therapist now. The reason I chose social work was just because of the breadth of things I could do. There was, I wasn't going to be honed in on just clinical psychology or counseling. I could do a lot of different things with it.
No, you're 100% right. And most therapists are social workers, and then they actually get their, what is it, the LSW?
Yeah,
LCS, right. Oh, right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, and then they could be a therapist, which is, fantastic. What's funny is that I interviewed Danny D'Lo, who is a great interview, also has a great YouTube channel. Do you know him?
Yeah, I do know him.
Okay. And he actually said the same thing. He goes, you'd be surprised, because he was also in a 1% Biker Club.
Yeah, I met him when he was in that club, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Really
Small
good,
club, right?
Yeah, really good dude. Like, I tell you, man, it's so funny that I'm getting off on track. But the guys that I get along with the best from this podcast, from meeting people, so on and so forth, are like just federally convicted. Just like the best guys that have been best to me was like Danny, James, and then Larry Mazza, who is a former mafia guy, and it's just like unbelievable. Like Johnny A. Light, I don't know if you know who that is. He was also a mafia dude. He let me come on his podcast for free, and like it was in Florida, so I could promote my own podcast. And
it's awesome.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Anyway, what I was gonna say is what Danny D'Lo told me, which I was surprised with, and you actually double down on it, is that a lot of the guys in clubs they're regular dudes. They're not these criminals everybody thinks they are. Like right. A lot of them are professionals. He goes, there were guys that we had in the club that were engineers, that were blue collar guys that, had trades, and then, even higher than that, educated, and so on and so forth. So like you said, you had a friend in your club that was a clinical psychologist. What percentage of guys are, regular guys, and what percentage of guys are like what people think they are?
Yeah, I would say that's a very small percentage of actual criminals. And I'll say, and here's a very valid point that I think you'll see, is that when you put on a patch, you're under the microscope by law enforcement, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're out here hustling, doing things, trying to make money, you really don't want to draw attention to it. So we're not necessarily attracting people that are a criminal element, because they're trying to lay low and do their own thing. Sure, we get more of the guys like me that came from something, and now this is more of a chit. Like, it actually forced me to stay out of trouble, because when I went out, if I'm getting in trouble and I'm wearing that patch, I'm representing the whole club. And if I'm out selling drugs or doing something stupid and get caught, it's going to affect everybody. So it actually, joining an organization that's bigger than yourself actually makes you tighten it up and actually toe the line, essentially, because you don't want to be that guy that, affects everyone else in your nation.
Oh, okay. That's impressive. It's it's funny how pop culture could just twist things around, because
for sure.
Danny told me the same thing. Danny said he joined the clubs because he liked the camaraderie, and he came from a rough background, just like yourself, when he was in prison and he was, gangbanging, this whole thing, and he actually, joined the club because he just missed being around the dudes, and he loved motorcycles, and it was kind of a similar story.
Yeah. And we all do love motorcycles. That's a really important part, I think, that gets missed. But yeah, that's one thing that brought everybody together. And even in that club I told you before about, I didn't have a lot in common. Well, that was the one thing that brought me around those guys, was that we do have a love for motorcycles and putting on miles and going on long rides.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you this question. I asked the same question to Hollywood. In today's time, the modern generations, the Gen Z, the millennials, the men, or the boys rather, they're lost. They're growing up with single mothers, or they're growing up with weak fathers, or their fathers aren't around. They might be around every other weekend because they're divorced or whatnot, and they're starving for like a masculine role model. And you see it, right? I mean, how Andrew Tate blew up, and he actually said, I didn't cast a spell on everybody. I didn't, these young guys are yearning for somebody like me to look up to, and they want to be like me. A lot of guys don't want to be feminine and control their emotion. I mean, be in their emotions and be ladylike, like they're being brought up and so on and so forth. They want to be men. It's innate. It's in their.
Right.
Why do you think that? And maybe it does, and correct me if I'm wrong. Why do you think that the young generation isn't more attracted to the biker clubs? Because I would think that there's a lot of masculine role models that could teach them something.
Man, I think the biggest difference between the generations is the newer generation. They want the clout for, social media or to say, do you know who I am? But none of them want to put in the work that it takes to get there. Right. That's what I see. So it may not be so much that they don't want it. They don't want to put in the work. I've seen a lot of guys join the club world. So they can say they're the boss. I want to be the president, or I want to be this, or I want these awards, but no one really wants to actually do the job or have the title. There's guys like us out there that had to do the position because we were best at it, but would rather give it to someone else. I don't want the extra work. Mm-hmm. But then there's the guys that wanted just the title for it. And I see there's a lot of guys that won't join the club because they don't want to prospect, or, no one's going to tell me what to do, that type of stuff. So I think there's some of that fake masculinity as well. Like, yes, I'm Mr. Tough Guy, but they're definitely not. And so, and then there's that to it too, right? There's the level of, like I said, guys that grew up, and I don't want to make people think I had a rough upbringing. I came from a very middle-class family, and I chose to come up rough. That wasn't me. But, there's guys that grew up, in violence and in the scene like me, or there's guys that came from the streets. They were already about something before they put that patch on. Mm-hmm. I think this new generation has it made on their mind that something like that's going to make them tough, but they're not tough people. And that's the hard part, right? And they can want to be as masculine as they want, but if they don't have heart, it's never going to work.
I see. That makes complete sense, actually. So now you make this change, you become a social worker. Is it being a social worker? Is it as satisfying as when you were in the club, or are there some things that are satisfying or not? Because you're basically helping people, right?
Yeah.
So is it as satisfying, or there's just satisfying elements as compared to the club life?
Yeah, well, I actually shared the life for quite a few years. So I graduated in 2016, and then I just retired. So there was probably a 5-year overlap where I was doing both.
Oh, okay.
And there's things to both of that. One, with my experience and degree, I actually helped a lot of brothers too, right? People would come to me with issues and problems, and people probably that wouldn't open up to others. So that played a big role. That was super satisfying. But one of the biggest things, like right now, I'm a multi-systemic therapist. So I work with teens that are on parole and probation. So I'm working with kids that we're trying to get them on the right path and get them out of trouble. So I think that's very rewarding. That's probably some of the most rewarding work I've done. I did a drug and alcohol counseling, and I didn't like it. Most of the people that were involved were court ordered. They didn't want to change. They, you know what I mean? They just want to tell you what they wanted to hear. But the most rewarding work I did was that. And then I actually was a facilitator of a group called Men Challenging Violence, where we were actually, I was counseling perpetrators of domestic violence and teaching them, for lack of a better word, a more feminist model, but a way to understand and respect women. And seeing that change was that's been some of the most heartfelt and meaningful stuff I've ever done. Cause that's, we're sitting around this group and this guy's like, yeah, my girl will never wear this out in public, and look over at me and go, right. I'll be like, nah. And then seeing that same guy 4 months down the road, and a new guy comes in saying that, and that guy being like, no, dude, that's not cool. You know what I mean? So stuff like that's probably been the most rewarding for me, for sure.
Right. Okay. So for the most part, you teach them to be masculine, but responsible, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Respectful
and responsible. Sure. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense, because and personally, I think that's fantastic, because I don't see many young guys today that have this masculinity but are responsible and respectful. They're either naive or they're criminals.
Right.
It doesn't seem to be that good balance. I personally believe it's because the young generations just don't have good male figures growing up.
It's definitely, modeling of your parents. So I like I said, I grew up in a really tight knit Italian family where every Sundays were, holidays, birthdays, but it was primarily women. And my grandfather was a great role model. In fact, man, if you swore in front of one of them, you were getting smacked in the head. If you were disrespecting any of them, you're getting smacked in the head. So, not that my grandpa's a violent man, it's just cultural, and you get it because you're Italian, right?
Yeah.
I had great role models in that aspect, and on top of that, like I said, my family was primarily women too. So, I was taught at an early age how to treat women and have that respect. And so for me, it kind of always made sense. But then I also get why a lot of people don't see that or didn't have that, and a lot of it does come back to parenting and how they were brought up.
Yeah, it really does. It because I was having a discussion today, and I remember I even had this discussion with James, and I said that the most fearful words I ever heard in my life were "wait till your father comes home."
Right.
And when your dad's not there, it's just it's just not the same. I mean, your mom. Here's the difference, as far as I can see. Right, your mom will discipline you when you drive her nuts.
Right.
Your dad will discipline you when you need to be accountable.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So if you fuck up in school or on the street or in the neighborhood or something like that, that's when dad steps in and goes, no. You need to.
Yes.
So right. But mom kind of disciplines you when you're annoying.
Yeah. Acting up in the home, fighting with your brother.
Yeah.
Not getting your chores done.
Yeah. Because it's instinctual for a woman to go to protect her son from outside elements. So to go, no, that's not my son. He didn't do that. It's your fault. It's so on and so forth. So
right.
if there's like a single mom or a mom with a dad that's kind of weak or not around or whatever, and the kid gets in trouble at school, she goes up to the school and she blames the teacher. I'm going to go talk to the teacher. I'm going to talk to the principal. I'm going to talk to this one, and a dad that would be more like us would be more like, what did you do? No, you tell me exactly what happened, and I'll make a decision whether you need to be disciplined or not. And it's just accountability, and there's and I don't see that. And
I see it a lot because the like I said, I'm working with teens on parole probation right now. The majority of them are single parent households. A lot of them are single mothers. Fathers aren't involved, and the few that are, a lot of what I'm seeing now in this generation is they want to be their teen's friend, right? They know that they've gone through they've all gone through so much together, and they're so close that they want that approval and they want to be their friend. So they don't follow through with consequences, or they lack consequences, and then they're wondering, well, hey, why is my kid doing whatever they want? And it falls back onto the fact that they're not having control of their household,
right?
So yeah, I mean that goes in line with what you're saying, and that seems to be pretty common.
Yeah, it is. And it's unfortunate that it's so prevalent. I mean, you have a 50% divorce rate. I think 40% of kids in general are born out of wedlock. I'm pretty sure 70% of inner city kids, from Black families, Hispanic families are born out of wedlock. And then once you get down to the raw statistics, it's kind of scary. There's 75% of men in jail come from single family homes, single mother homes.
Yeah.
And if you don't grow up with a father in the house, the statistics are you are 20 times more likely to be in prison.
Yeah, it's wild, and I think it definitely comes back to that accountability factor and the role modeling. Right? You don't have, especially if you're a male, you're going to look up to your father, and you need to have somebody to role model after. And if you don't, you might find that older negative peer or that older guy on the street, and then
100%. Yes, it happens to be 100% true. So I tip my hat off to you, man, because that is a fantastic, fulfilling way to make a living. Now, changing subjects a little bit, you're also into MMA, jiu-jitsu, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that, and how far have you taken it as far as fighting and so on and so forth?
Okay, yeah. So I grew up wrestling, like I said. I think me and my brother started Mat Club in like second or third grade. Wrestled all through high school. Didn't wrestle in college or anything. And actually, when I got that felony charge when I was 18, one of the stipulations was that I had to do some sort of sport. So I actually got into boxing for a little bit. But then it's been years. I'm not a good boxer by any means, but I had some base. I had some foundation. I wish I would have known about jujitsu when I was younger. When I got out of high school, MMA was still the Gracies and the initial UFC, and guys were getting their limbs broken and just smashed, and you know what I mean. And I was like, no. Even though I was doing this stuff in the street, that seemed really intimidating. So I didn't really do it in like a structured environment. I think probably in my early 20s, I tried Muay Thai for a little bit, and I really liked it, but I just didn't have the dedication. Had too much other stuff going on. And then around 2015, I was going through a breakup, or 2014, I was engaged and my fiance had left, and I was really starting to kind of, I was just getting ready to graduate from my bachelor's degree, and I was really trying to kind of better my life. So that's when I really got into fitness and working out. Mm-hmm. And then after about a year of lifting, it's like, man, I got to do something else too, and I tried Krav Maga initially. And I made it. Wow. Yeah. And a lot of my friends did jujitsu, and I'm that guy that wanted my own thing. Right. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go do this. And I made it through one class, and, a lot of law enforcement train in that. Yeah. And because I had this charge of trying to run these cops off the road, the law enforcement made a big deal, and the instructor called me and said I couldn't come back to class. And around the same time, I'd sued the state for discrimination because from part of my job for my internship, I was supposed to intern somewhere, and I was interning at the kids' prison. I just got hired on to be a counselor at the kids' prison. Mm-hmm. And funny story, I'm sorry, I'm getting really sidetracked, but it's a funny story. So they send me to go do this training, this 2-day training. And it's just an address. It doesn't say where it is. So cool. I nab it up, show up, and it's the state police department or police academy. Okay. And I remember thinking, man, I'm arrogant. No one here knows who I am. I'm just, you go and check, go in here and get your training done. Right. I made it a day and a half before they kicked me out. I didn't even make it through the parking lot when I guess it was the chief of police saw me walking through and filed a complaint. So I ended up suing, and I actually won for discrimination. But the point was, I was in the paper a lot at that time, and that was the same time I was trying that Krav Maga. So a lot of those cops knew who I was, and they didn't want me there.
So for people who don't know what that is, what type of martial arts that is, why don't you explain it?
Yeah, I don't know a ton about it, but it's lack of better words, I'm not sure.
I think it's an Israeli form.
It's like this Israeli special forces apparently created it or invented it. But really, essentially, it's fighting in any situation. So it was all sorts of weapons, eye gouging. I mean, it's like it's supposed to be the be all. Any means necessary. Let's end this fight.
Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to. Is that Krav Maga is you fight to win no matter what, and if you are police or security or Israeli combat, it's to restrain the person, get to your weapon immediately. Yeah. So restrain the person, pull your gun, restrain the person, pull your knife, and do what you got to do to end this. It's not actually more like, it's not more of like competitive fighting.
Right.
Yeah.
I was really intrigued in it. From what I've known now, trying to get into it and looking into it, I think it's pretty watered down at this point because they're trying to make it marketable, right? Commercial, and everyone has to train in it. But the initial idea of it, I thought was super cool, and I was really intrigued. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so they told me I couldn't come back. And so one of my buddies that was also in the club kept telling me to try jujitsu. And so I went to my first jujitsu class, and the head instructor, I think he was a brown belt at the time, and now he's a black belt. Turned out he was on my wrestling team in high school. Wow. So I had that. Yeah. So I had that initial, immediate connection. And the first class I took, it reminded me so much of wrestling that was it for me, man. I was hooked. I ended up going like 2 to 3. I was training 2-3 times a day, 5 to 6 days a week, and was really getting after it. I think I did my first tournament after like training for 2 months.
Now this was Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I did my first tournament in the gi at a white belt for beginners, and I won one and lost one. So I got second place. And then I was just hooked, man. I kept trying to compete and train. I earned my blue belt, and then actually, so I was trying to do the world championship for white belt, and I was down there training for worlds in LA. And I met this team, Pedigo Submission Fighting, and they were all from the middle of nowhere. No one knew who they were. They were just kind of grungy looking, just kind of, poor kids from the Midwest. And I remember thinking, oh, cool, I'm gonna wreck these dudes, and every one of them kicked my ass. And not just kicked my ass, like one dude subbed me 5 times in one round, right? Wow. Well, I think most people would have been like, "Oh, stay away from them," but I was like, "Man, I gotta know these dudes." So I got really close with them, and that's one of the reasons I ended up moving out here to Mount Vernon, Illinois, was to join their team.
Oh, okay, that's fantastic. All right. What's funny is that I remember when I had moved from Brooklyn to Staten Island, and there was I saw that where I lived there was a martial arts, and I was like, oh, let me try it. It says jujitsu, karate, judo, blah 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 blah. I just walked in and I was like, yeah, I want to join. And I just joined. It was all cops. I was the only not cop.
Yeah.
And all they did was kick the shit out of me. And it's like I don't understand why you would just I'm just gonna leave and join somewhere else if you just kick the shit out of me every
Right.
time I come here. It's just unbelievable,
That's
but
what I didn't get about the Krav Maga situation is, first of all, these guys were all trained. They've been training there a bunch. If they had some sort of issue, why didn't they just let me stay and beat the shit out of me all the time, right? And then, I mean, thankfully it didn't happen, but I just don't get the mindset of just kicking me out. The other thing is, if they're in law enforcement and, I was a leader or, pretty high up in this club that I was in, why not try and get to know me? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't get why the first reaction was, hey, this dude can't be here.
Listen, I'm for the most part, I'm pro cop, but if we're going to be real about it, they have an aura about them, an energy, a personality about them that is, they only get along with themselves.
Yeah.
They really don't. Like, I grew up and I had one friend that was a cop and his name was John. And after some time, he stopped hanging out with us because he just had the cop attitude all the time. And all we wanted to do was like go out, meet girls, get fucked up, meet girls. And he would always carry his gun on him and his badge on him. And I remember going out with him one night, we were like in our early 20s. It's like, John, dude, there's no bad guys where we're going. You don't have to bring your gun with you.
Right.
Like we're going to try and get laid. That's what we're doing, and
that's the funny part about it, man. These guys get into law enforcement. And I definitely believe there's good cops out there. I've met some cool ones in the jiu-jitsu scene. Pretty much anyone I met that does jiu-jitsu has been cool. Yeah. But it's a low paid job that a lot of people don't want, and they're not well liked anymore. So I think they attract a certain type of people these days. And the scary thing is they buy all these different narratives that are taught to them in training or whatever. And it's based off of, like you were saying, like off of TV or TV shows and all these different things. And like, for example, the motorcycle club stuff, man, if you're a cop and you're really under the impression that everyone in a patch is selling drugs and doing all this stuff, then you also have to admit you're terrible at your job, right? Because they're wearing a patch and flagging your face or doing it and you're not busting them. So at what point which one do you want to believe? You can't have it both ways, but no one seems to take a step back and really look at, the logical aspect of it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's 100%. And don't get me wrong. I've met cops that are really cool. There's two guys in the gym that I go to that I'm real friendly with. And the one guy is an amateur bodybuilder trying to turn pro. And the other guy is just a guy who stays in shape. And they're both really cool guys. One's a cop. I'm in Jersey now. So one's a cop in Newark. The other guy's a cop in Patterson. And they're really good dudes. So don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is they're very clannish.
Yeah.
And they like to stay together. And they have like, they'll say things or have conversations with a normal person will be rolling their eyes,
Yeah.
Where it's kind of like, I remember I was dating a cop, this girl, and she's like, yeah, I had to leave, I took her to a family gathering with me. This was way before I met my wife, and so she tells my brother, yeah, I left early, they wanted me to stay because somebody got stabbed and I had to wrap up paperwork. And I was like, I don't care if you got stabbed. I got somewhere to go, and it's like that kind of, it's like this machismo kind of like fake thing. And it's just, and I remember going, oh my God, wow. Christ.
And I think too, that's why if you meet the guys that are doing weightlifting or doing martial arts or whatever, a lot of people in that scene are humbled at some point, right? And they're more kind of on a chill level. So I think if you meet law enforcement through training, you're meeting a different type of law enforcement than just the general on the street too.
I agree, because I think martial arts keeps you humble.
Definitely.
Because like you said, there's always going to be somebody better. And there's always going to be somebody that, like you said, you had gotten submitted 5 times and, one match, and that's humbling. That's humble for you, especially when you come from like, I'm the toughest motherfucker. And it's like, nah, not really.
Yeah. That's the best thing for me. If you grow up fighting and then you go get into a pro fight like that and you realize you have no idea what you're doing, you're like, yeah, but I grew up doing this. Like, well, it didn't matter. You were doing it wrong.
Yeah, no, it happens to be true, man. I mean, I remember like, Kimbo Slice, in the street, he was the man.
Yep.
And then he started fighting like real fighters, and not so much.
Yeah. And I think there's a benefit to both, right? There's a lot of guys I met that are really good fighters that don't have the heart for street stuff, or they don't have that switch to take it to the level they would need to go to, or the brutality they would need on the streets. And then vice versa, there's guys that, are very violent people, but they don't know how to use it. So I think there's a good balance between the two too. I think on each ends, there's those polar opposites.
Okay. Very cool. All right. So now you have a YouTube channel. It's called Mondays with Mooch. And what exactly do you talk about? Or what's the channel about?
Yeah. So, I started it out, like I said, initially I wanted to do it with my brother and just kind of talk about our life. We've done a lot of cool stuff, being from the music scene to then getting in the biker club. And, he owns a foster home for adults with developmental disabilities. I'm a social worker. So, it's pretty cool stories that we wanted to share. He ended up at the time, he's not doing it with me. So then I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I share some stories of my youth? And then, like I said, not just sit here and stare at the computer screen. So the first thing it is, I actually had a spinal fusion in 2008.
So did I.
Yeah.
Not in 2008. I had got mine 2 years ago.
I have C3 through T1. So it's like this much in the whole back.
Oh, you got, no, I only got through like that much.
So they told me I couldn't, ride motorcycles anymore or do jujitsu or even lift weights. And, I wanted to prove people wrong. So, the first thing I did after my fusion was I hired a trainer. I got really into that strong first kettlebell stuff because I really wanted to build my core, and my fusion's in the back of my neck. So it pushes my posture forward. And so I wanted to build a lot.
They went through the front here, or they went through the back.
Mine went through the back.
No,
they usually go through the front.
This guy went through the front, but go ahead.
And so I wanted to do a lot of stuff because I was very self-conscious about my posture. I was hunched. And so I hired a trainer and I worked a ton of core stuff. And then when I got back into being able to just actually lift, at the time, I couldn't even lay flat on an Olympic bench because I couldn't lean my head back. And then I probably lost 40 pounds. So my first was getting back into lifting. And then I got back into training. First I was just watching, and then I was drilling, but then I got back to live rolling. And then I started riding again. And so my first YouTube video was me. I rode from Illinois to Oregon and back. And I did it by myself, solo, and I recorded the trip. And I put a YouTube, a video together of like the cool places I went and where I stopped. So that was my very first one. I've done some like product reviews that I've done from, riding cross country. And then I've tried to do like interviews with different people. I've done some where like they're just protocol related. There's another guy from Wild on Twos, Carlos. He's friends with Danny. He does stuff with Danny and with Hollywood. But, basic stuff like, hey, what's prospecting like? Or what are expectations of hang-arounds? And so I've done some of that stuff with him too. But some of the more fun ones are the ones where I just talk about my life stuff. I had the singer for my band on, and we just talked like tour stories, like how our band started and, being on the road. So that's kind of my goal, is to have more people from my life so that we can tell stories without it just being my perspective.
Yeah, that's actually, for people that are into motorcycles and biker life, that's actually pretty interesting. Now, when you did that run, what kind of bike were you riding on?
Brand new Harley Davidson Road Glide ST. So
wow, very nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's when it was 2022 when you did it?
Yeah. No, wow. Yeah, that was the year. Yeah. And I put, let's see, I just did it. That was in July. I had that bike for 8 months and put 10,000 miles on it.
Oh, wow. Okay. I got a 2015 and all I got is 10,000 miles on.
Yeah.
But I just bought it used. I got it this year. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I've had 20 different bikes. So I think that's going to be my next episode. I want to talk about all the different bikes I've had and kind of the stories behind them.
You've had how many bikes?
28.
Wow.
Yeah.
And all Harleys?
No, I've had some sport bikes. When I lived in Oregon, I got really into dual sporting. So on road, off road, I'd be riding around the mountains, I'd be gone all day and not see anybody. I mean, that was some of the probably most fun riding I've done.
Okay.
I've had some sport bikes, but mainly Harleys. Yeah.
And what kind of Harleys did you have, and which ones do you like the best?
Man, with my injury right now, I think the Road Glide has been probably my favorite. Just, it's best for blocking wind and, having a big fairing, and then just packing. As you get older, I like to pack stuff and be comfortable.
Yeah, that's the kind of in between that, because I love the classic Harley Davidson look. Did you see the one I put it on my Instagram? I don't know if you saw it.
I did see it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I just had it like complete. It was green. It was the what do they call that? Radioactive green.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I changed it from radioactive green, and I kind of blacked everything out and worked it a little bit, And it has the ape hangers, and I put cams in it, and the all-in-S air intake, and the Vance and Hines pipes, and now it's like a beast, right? So
yeah, sure.
And it's just fucking awesome. But my brother has been riding since he's 19 years old, and he is now 60, right? And he has a group of guys that he goes to. He was kind of in and out of clubs his whole life, and he has a group of guys now, and he's like, "Yeah, come on, we're gonna go ride. I want to come with me." And he's like, I was like, all right. He goes, yeah, we're going to Pennsylvania. And he lives in Staten Island. And I'm like, I actually talked to him. I was like, dude, I don't think I'm ready for that. I was like,
Right.
I was like, yeah, let me kind of, crawl before I fly here for, you know what I mean? So maybe next year I'll probably go with him. But, I love those like, hardcore, like Harley looking. But if I were to do long riding, I think I'd have to get something like
Yeah,
you
and see,
have.
that's where I'm on the fence. My bike's really expensive. I've been thinking about going back to like a street bob or a Dyna. But man, you get so used to having bags and a fairing. It's hard. It's hard to
Yeah.
downsize once you've been there. Growing up, we always made fun of the guys on the baggers. And so even when I joined clubs, like in the West Coast, no one rode baggers back then. It was like choppers or like club style Dynas. And then now it seems like, everyone has them because
Everybody has a bag.
it makes sense too. Like if you're in a club and you've got stuff to carry with you and change your clothes and rain gear or your overnight stuff, and then you're riding long distance, obviously it makes sense to be a club bike, but
Yeah.
it definitely doesn't look as cool as a traditional like Harley look for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I'll tell you, they make some beautiful ones, and the technology is unbelievable.
It's crazy, man. I got that Pan America when it came out, and it has like 3 different ride modes and electric adjustable suspension and all sorts of
yeah. My brother had an Indian. I forgot the Chieftain, I think it was, and then he traded in and got a Road Glide. I'm pretty sure he got a Road Glide. Yes, a Road Glide. And I remember he came to my house on the Indian, and he was telling me the adjustable suspension for you and the passenger, crazy, and so on and so forth. I'm like, my God, that's unbeliable.
It's wild.
The shield that the like kind of like the window in the front
electric
goes up and down. Yeah, it's I tell you, it's unreal, man.
It had different power modes. So like if each mode was a different engine mapping, so you can do like highway mode, which was still pretty quick, but it saved on gas. It wasn't as responsive. Then there was a sport mode that super responsive, quicker throttle, and all just from a push of a button. And each mode felt like a different bike. Like it's pretty crazy, man.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how far they came with technology, man. It really, really is. Okay, man. Listen, I want to thank you for coming on. And Mondays with Mooch on YouTube. It is going to be, I'm telling you, this guy is going to be the next big YouTuber as far as motorcyclists and biker clubs come, and there's a lot of them coming out. You got Danny D'Lo, you got Hollywood, you got Sos the Ghost, and now we got you. And you guys are following suit. And I'm telling you, you have to tune into this guy. He's got great content. Mondays with Mooch on YouTube. And where else can they find you?
I'm on Instagram, OG_Mooch. And then I actually Lift Train Ride Movement is on Instagram as well. And that's a lot of guys that from a club world that left club world and now are into either jiu-jitsu or boxing, some sort of fight sports, and then lifting weights. So Lift Train Ride. It's Lift_Train_Ride. So check that out on Instagram. I think a lot of your viewers, since you guys do a lot of that stuff, would be into it. But it's pretty much guys that lift weights and ride motorcycles and train in fighting arts. So that's kind of what we're doing now.
So here's what I'm going to do. And in the description area, I am going to put the link for your YouTube channel, and I'm going to put the 2 links for your Instagram so people could go immediately.
Thank you so much.
And I'll actually tag you in the title so that people could just pick it up right away. And dude, thank you very much. Don't go anywhere because I want to talk to you about the guests that you could possibly have on your show. Great. But I definitely appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.